Hi guys, and in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to set up Kali Linux using a MacBook Pro so that you've got a Linux bootable drive, and also we're going to add persistence to it as well, so that all of the changes that you make or any documents that you create during your Linux session will be persisted to your next session also. So this can sometimes be a bit tricky to do, so I'm going to break it down as easily as I can. So the first thing you're going to need to do is prepare your drive. So we'll open up our disk utility in OS X here, and this is my external drive. So you can see here it's currently one large partition, like it would be when you purchase your external thumb drives. So what we're going to do is select partition, and we're going to make this into a smaller partition of around 5.5 gigabytes. And the format we're going to want to change to an MS-DOS format, and I'm going to name this Kali Linux. That will be the name of this drive. So once you've done that, you can press apply. And now you'll see we are going to end up with two partitions here. The second partition, it's going to automatically then format as a Mac OS extended file system. Okay, so now that's done, you'll see that we have our first partition of 5.4 gigabytes, which is the Kali Linux. And then we have a second partition here, 10.2 gigabytes, which is untitled. Now, I'm going to partition that again. So we'll select this 10 gigabyte partition. We're going to drag that down to a 5.4 gigabyte partition. And I'm going to label this one persistence. And again, I'm going to choose the MS-DOS format. And we'll hit apply and wait for it to complete. And then you'll see now that we have three partitions. We'll have two MS-DOS partitions, and we're going to have one Mac OS partition at the end. So the second partition, when everything is completed, should be labeled persistence. So that's going to be the section of the drive that Linux will save its configuration files to, and where all of your persistence will be stored. So now we've prepared the drive, the next thing we're going to need to do is actually set it up to work as a live bootable drive. Now there's this utility here called Max Linux USB Loader, which you can use. So you can create a live USB. We select our downloaded Kali Linux disk image, so you need to download that from Kali Linux website, and then we're going to choose the drive that it would be installed to. The distribution will be Kali, and begin installation. I have a bit of a problem with this. It's bringing up that this USB device has been denied access to. So a workaround that I had for this was I already had managed to make one previously before this software stopped working. So what it actually does is it creates this file system, a folder called EFI, another folder called boot, and inside of there it places these three files. Now there's a link at the bottom of this YouTube video where you can actually download this from, so you can reuse this yourself. And all we're going to actually do is open up our Kali Linux partition here, and we're going to copy this EFI across there. So EFI, boot, and then these three files are contained inside. The next thing we're going to want to do then is get our Kali Linux disk image, which I have here in my downloads, and you're going to want to copy this across as well to the USB. So that takes a few moments. So Command C, and we'll copy it into the boot folder. Command V. That's going to take a few moments to copy across. I'm just going to pause this video while that's happening, and I'll see you in a few moments when it's finished. Those files have now finished copying over. Now it's in here, we just need to rename this ISO, and we'll rename it with the name boot.iso. And that basically now is our drive prepared. You could actually boot now into a Linux live session. If you were to reboot and hold down the option key on your MacBook Pro, you would get an option to boot into either Mac OS X or using the EFI menu. If you chose EFI, you would then be able to select this Linux distribution. Now there's one final thing that we need to do, which is edit this. Well, I've actually already edited it, so if you download this from the link below, then you won't need to edit it. But if you created this using the Mac Linux USB loader, then you're going to have to go into Setup USB Device, and in your Kali Linux, you're going to go to Edit Enterprise Configuration File, and that will bring up this file here. Now, by default, when you create these USB drives using the Mac USB loader, it will not have persistence written there. It will the host name will just be Kali. But we're going to add persistence into that. So then every time we boot, it will always boot into the persistence mode. So like I said, if you download this link from the link below the video, then I've already edited it. So if you were to open this with text edit, you'll see here it already says persistence. If you don't want to boot into persistence mode, then simply delete the word persistence that comes after the host name. But I would definitely advise using persistence mode, particularly if you're working on a MacBook, because you'll find that there's going to be packages and things that you're going to want to install. There's going to be drivers you're going to have to get the wireless card working. The wireless card can be a little tricky. I've got some tutorials on that over on my blog and also here on the YouTube channel, showing how to get that working. So definitely persistence mode is a good idea, because it means that all those changes that you make in the drivers you install will persist from session to session. You're not going to have to go through all of that setup every single time. So that basically is how we prepare it. Now there's one other thing that you're going to need to do. Now if you remember, we created a persistence partition. So we actually have to do some editing to that to this persistence partition, but that needs to be done from within Linux itself, because I don't have any free tools here for Mac OS X, which allows you to format this as an ext3 partition, which is what it needs to be. And then there's also some command line commands that we need to run in order to mount this and make sure that persistence works. So I'm going to reboot. I'm going to boot up into our live boot of Kali Linux, and we'll carry on there with setting up this persistence drive. So here we are now in our live boot of Kali Linux, and we're going to open gparted, and we're going to use the gparted tool to update the partition on our drive. The partition we created earlier on this drive was MS-DOS format, but we want it to be ext3. So we can format it to the ext3 format, which we can't do from within OS X natively itself. So this is the easiest way of doing it is by using this tool here, which is in Kali Linux called gparted. And that's what you can see me doing now. Once you've made the changes, you'll apply them. We also want to give this partition a label called persistence. So we'll add that afterwards. So we'll just let that run through it's formatting and creating a file system. Just takes a few moments. So what this is going to do is create a file system with the format of ext3, which is something that Linux is going to be able to read. After you do this, this partition is no longer going to show up when you insert this USB drive into other machines. It can only be read by Linux. So this partition will not even be visible. If you go into the disk utility in Mac OS X later, you'll actually see the partition will be there, but it won't be able to read its name or anything like that, and you won't be able to mount it within OS X itself. Okay, so now that's done. We just need to then add in the label, which is persistence. And once that's been done, we just apply all those changes again, or apply all those operations. Now I'm also going to show you a command line way that you can do this using terminal. It can also be done there if you're more comfortable using terminal. So first of all, you want to check out a list of all of the disks, and you can see that the one that we've got here is dev SDC3. That is the partition that we just created is dev SDC3. So if we wanted to create the file system from here within terminal itself, we can use the following command: makefs.ext3 -l capital for and then persistence /dev /sdc3. Could be SDB3 if you only have one USB drive inserted. I've got two in here at the moment. It's going to give us a warning that this is already exists as a partition and do want to proceed. Obviously you don't need to because we just created it in gparted, but if you weren't using the gparted tool, if you were just using the command line, then you wouldn't get that warning there. So again, it takes a few moments, a bit like using gparted, for it to actually run its course and create that file system. Once it's done, here, what next thing we're going to need to do is just set up a mount point for this partition. So every time you boot into the USB live drive persistence mode, you're going to be able to mount this, or it will be mounted actually automatically. So we're going to create a persistence configuration file which Linux will use. So I'll just give this partition its label, so e2 label /dev /sdc3 persistence. And now we'll go ahead and create these mount points. So first of all, we're going to have to make a directory to mount it to, so make dir -p /mnt /my USB. And then we're going to mount /dev /sdc3 because we want to mount that partition into the location that we just created, so /mnt /my USB. Then in that folder, we're going to create the persistence.conf file with the following terminal command that you can see being typed in there. And then once we're done with this, we can then execute the unmount /dev /sdc3 command to unmount this drive. Now once we're done with that, that's actually everything that needs to be done in order to set up your Linux live drive with Kali Linux and persistence. It's a similar process that you're going to go through for other editions of Linux as well. So I hope you found this useful, and don't forget to head over to my blog where you can get more information on how to set up your USB live drive with Kali Linux. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.